Hello, this is Ross Bliley from the podcast Pigskin Tales. This podcast is sponsored by Sterling Soap Company. With products sold throughout 41 locations around the globe, Sterling Soap Company has a unique assortment of products to choose from for your loved one for the holidays. Handmade artisan soaps created by Roderick and Amanda Lovin since 2012, these products are affordable and provide great value. Act now and save on your shipping costs. If you purchase $75 or more, your shipping cost is free in the United States. Shop now online at sterlingsoap.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Now, live and direct from the press box at Old Comiskey Park, it's time for When Football Was Football. Let's join your host, Joe Ziemba, with another forgotten tale from Chicago's pro football history. Let's go!
Thank you for that kind introduction and welcome to this episode of When Football Was Football, here on the Sports History Network. Throughout the history of professional football, every so often you might notice a club roster that is so strong, so impressive, and so very talented that you just could not anticipate anything less than total success for that specific team. This may have been the case with the 1931 Chicago Bears, a squad that featured no less than 4 future Hall of Famers in Red Grange, Bronko Nagurski, Lyman, and George Trafton. Despite this wealth of talent, the Bears stumbled to a good but not great 8-5 record, finishing in just 3rd place in the final standings of the National Football League. Of course, this was before the league was divided into 2 divisions, and there was no playoff system in effect, so that last game was indeed the end of the season. While specific reasons for a team's failure to achieve expectations are difficult to identify, opponents of the professional game at that time in 1931 might eagerly point out that the pros, unlike their collegiate counterparts, simply didn't care about anything more than a payday. Were the Chicago Bears doomed to failure because of the players' lack of spirit or zest for the game itself? Was there a roster loaded with highly paid individuals who simply did not care? Were they unprepared, indifferent, or selfishly inspired or uninspired compared to the rah-rah-rah atmosphere at the collegiate level? In reality, this type of theory was closer to gossip than anything else. There was certainly a veil of unintended secrecy surrounding the workings of professional football teams at that time. Without social media, television, or other current communication modes available in 1931, there wasn't much information from newspapers featuring behind-the-scenes access about players or teams. While newspapers covering collegiate teams might provide extensive byline game previews and post-game coverage, there was little by comparison on the professionals in terms of creative or unusual feature articles. Readers seeking insightful inside information on their favorite team would often need to rely on redundant wire service coverage. Supporters of the college game pointed to the ever-present zest of the game as being far superior to the professionals. But does zest ensure a better product on the field? In terms of the times, perhaps we can agree that zest on the university level was marked by the enthusiasm and loyalty of the player and their determination to win at all costs for the honor and glory of their academic institution. On the other hand, did the pros really possess any zest? And if so, what prompted this attribute? It was in all likelihood a paycheck. Or was there something more? And so this brings us back to the 1931 Bears, a club that, despite its talented roster, moved into midseason with a lackluster 3-3 record. Could this truly be blamed on a lack of spirit or zest from the professionals? Zest is a challenging word to define, especially in terms of professional football, but with the Bears ailing a bit on the field, the Chicago American newspaper received permission from the organization to investigate the possibility that perhaps the pros did lack that type of spirit that propelled the collegians in their on-field performance. As a result, the Chicago American provided us with a rare peek behind the scenes with a lighthearted look at the zest of professional football players, and we promise not to use the word zest too often. Of course, we must remember that the professional football scene in 1931 was far different than it is today, where it reigns as the most beloved of all professional sports in this country. We were still 3 years away from the first college all-star game in 1934, and 5 years from the inauguration of the initial NFL draft in 1936. Fans loved debating the respective merits of both sides of the football spectrum, citing whether the pros or the collegians played the better brand of football. The college game continued to flourish with massive crowds pouring into campus stadiums on bright autumn afternoons. The pros, meanwhile, continued to struggle with attendance issues despite the sudden ascension of the game during the debut of the two Red Grange tours in 1925 and 1926. And so the article by Jim Gallagher in the Chicago American attempted to cover that chasm in the 1931 pro ranks between the elusive Zest and the disengaged pro football worker, who apparently was only in it for the money. The results were a bit surprising based on rare locker room interaction conducted by the reporter, since interviews with players were not always documented on a regular basis in the media in those early days of the NFL. The article appeared on Thursday, November 5, 1931, when the talented Bears were embroiled in a busy schedule preparing for a Sunday matchup with the invading Portsmouth Spartans at Wrigley Field in Chicago. Following a tough 6-2 defeat at the hands of the Green Bay Packers the previous weekend on November 1st, the Bears had slipped to that 3-3 mark midway through the season, but hoped to salvage their title hopes by succeeding in their next 5 games over the upcoming 21 days in November, beginning with the Spartans. The loss to the Packers was especially tough since the defeat left the Bears well behind 8-0 Green Bay in the NFL championship race. The Green Bay Press-Gazette described the action thusly: "The game was tense, occasionally sensational, often thrilling, and always dogged." Dogged? Yet the Bears could only manage a safety for their sole points of the day. Meanwhile, the Packers' offense struggled as well, with the team's lone touchdown occurring when Mike Michalski rambled 80 yards with an intercepted pass thanks to massive Packers lineman Cal Hubbard destroying Bears quarterback Carl Brumbaugh as he attempted a pass, according to the Press-Gazette, which said, "Brumbaugh slipped back to pass. Big, broad Cal Hubbard came charging in at him like a locomotive. Brumbaugh couldn't throw the ball to the man the play called for as Cal smashed into him, so he threw wildly. Mike Michalski came bounding out from behind the line. He grabbed the ball on his own 20-yard line and started to gallop." Well, 3 days later, Jim Gallagher showed up in the Bears' locker room to conduct interviews for his article, which was intended to focus on the lack of zest, there we go again, among professional football players. Much to his surprise, he quickly discovered just the opposite. Instead of grumpy, uncooperative players, Gallagher encountered a room full of dedicated but playful individuals who were still recovering from the tough loss in Green Bay. Gallagher described his 8:30 a.m. arrival time at Wrigley Field to be, in quotes, unearthly. Yet he found the Bears players to be prompt and anxious for practice to begin. He asked Garland Grange, who was the brother of Red Grange, why he showed up so early for the 9:30 practice, and Grange replied, "Oh, I just like to be here in plenty of time." Gallagher then brought up that delicate question about whether the money-hungry pros would ever agree to play, let alone have a chance, against the top amateur collegiate teams. Grange was quick to respond by saying, "Gosh, if we could only get Northwestern or Notre Dame for a charity game, every man in this club would play for nothing, just for the pleasure of beating them." Well, adjacent to Garland Grange, Coach Ralph Jones of the Bears was quietly diagramming a play on the blackboard for linemen Lloyd Burdick and Bert Pearson. Naturally, reporter Gallagher asked Grange what type of play they were reviewing, and Grange replied, "They're going over that play that lost the Green Bay game when Hubbard came through and deflected Brumbaugh's pass to Michalski when he ran 80 yards for their touchdown." Gallagher was a bit shocked by the answer and said to Grange, "Why, I thought you only played for the dough. And you tell me they're still worrying over playing a game here 3 days ago?" Indeed, the members of the Bears were not only worrying about that specific play, they were still fuming about it, forcing Gallagher to note to his readers, "It seems I was wrong. They'll worry about that game until they beat the Packers. The lucky stiffs," they called them. The great Red Grange strolled into the locker room next, ready for practice with a swollen upper lip and a pair of front teeth missing after the Green Bay battle, while a prone halfback named Joe Linsich, with serious leg and wrist injuries, was being worked on by trainer Andy Lotshaw. Despite his injuries, Linsich told Coach Jones, "Oh, the leg and arm hurt, and I can't throw passes, but I'll be able to get into practice today." Again, this was not what reporter Gallagher had expected to witness. He anticipated that a wounded pro warrior would milk his injury as long as possible in order to preserve his health for future paychecks. But here was Linsich, who could barely walk, intending to practice with the rest of the Bears on a cold November morning. As the full roster of players swarmed into the locker room, Gallagher was surprised once more when the expected group of dour, silent men complaining both about the early hour as well as the need for practice failed to materialize. Instead, he wrote, by 9 o'clock the room had filled with players. Early morning isn't generally a cheerful time, but there was the same horsing around and kidding that you find in any dressing room. Coach Ralph Jones, who took over the team following the 1929 season when co-owners Dutch Sterneman and George Hallis retired from coaching, acknowledged the positive personality of the club as reported by Gallagher by saying, "Coach Jones declares that never in high school or college has he worked with a more amenable group of men, with any gang more willing and able to learn, or which enjoyed playing anymore." Gallagher then moved outside at Wrigley Field as Jones moved the team through a lengthy, nearly 3-hour practice session focusing on a dummy scrimmage that Gallagher painted as no fun, no tackling, no contest, just running through plays for a couple of hours. Of all tiresome, uninteresting proceedings, dummy scrimmages is it. In a sense, Gallagher was amazed by the lively interaction he observed during the practice drills, along with the readily apparent enthusiasm of the veteran players. He added, 2 hours after they started, they were still sweeping through plays with speed, precision, and vim. They were enjoying it, and none more than quarterback Lori Walquist and center George Trafton, who should be fed up with football if anyone should. After all, their years in the game. In the dressing room later, Lori called over to Gallagher as he strolled out of the shower room. "Hey, it's still a lot of fun, Jimmy." By gum, I believe it was. Perhaps they were revitalized by the positive spin of Gallagher's article, but the Bears then rattled off 4 straight wins, beginning with the Portsmouth game, to launch back into title contention with a 7-3 record. However, no one was going to catch the Packers that season as Green Bay snatched the NFL crown with an impressive 12-2 ledger. The Bears finished with the aforementioned 8-5 mark in third place, a step ahead of the 5-4 Chicago Cardinals, back in an era when all NFL teams did not play an equitable schedule. No, yes, the Bears did manage to beat the Packers in their final game that game. But the Bears were not to be denied, winning NFL championships in both 1932 and 1933. If James Gallagher's article proved anything, it was that professionals could still enjoy the various aspects of the game in much the same way that collegiate players did, or so we thought. In a concluding statement to his article, where he provided a final thought regarding his quest to discover if there was any zest in the NFL, Gallagher recalled a recent experience with a college locker room. He said, "I thought too of some scenes in college dressing rooms where one man charged that a teammate had deliberately shirked out a play because he didn't like the ball carrier. Or when the coach was called a dummy by his high-priced stars, and high-priced is the right word, where one clique hardly spoke to another because of jealousy. Just what is this zest for the game? Could it be that the wicked pros really have it after all?" Thank you for listening to this episode of When Football Was Football on the Sports History Network.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.